long 2 days. Conferences are a lot of work, even just like as attending and stuff. It's been a while since I've been on stage, about 6 months or so, so I have a lot of things to talk about and not much time. But the first thing I need to do is give a shout out to my new friend Keith over there, who I introduced myself to when Amelie was talking, and I had this very awkward moment where she told us to compliment them. I was just like, I like your shirt. And I plan on agonizing over that moment for the rest of my life. So, as you can tell, I don't have a beard, so you know this is going to be really funny. So yeah, thank you to Generate for having me today, April 27th, 2018. That's what my watch says. On April 22nd, 2013, almost exactly 5 years ago to this day, I put in my 2 weeks notice at Montclair State University, which is about 20 miles away. And I was the computer science department administrator there for a couple of years. And 3 days before that, I was offered a senior front-end engineer role at the National Basketball Association. And the 2 days in between this huge career change, I was absolutely miserable. I'm not sure why. I can't really articulate it. I'm not great at words. I'm more of a numbers person. But I couldn't tell what was more bananas to me, the fact that a globally adored sports league could love someone who like wears heels and is a numbers and education nerd. Or what's crazier was the fact that I spent those 2 days in between the accepting the role of a lifetime to giving my notice to a gig I didn't want anymore in bed sobbing uncontrollably, only stopping to like answer the door when my takeout delivery arrived. The thing is that changing careers is essentially ending a relationship and starting a new one all at once. And it's a lot more lonely, though. It's great, but also bad. Usually it's like not on your own terms, something is taken away from you, inevitably someone's going to replace you and rewrite the narrative that you've created or replace the work or take credit for the work that you have. And where I'm from, where I grew up, here in New York, quit is considered a 4-letter word. And through quitting academia, I sort of gained the guilt of directly decreasing the number of women in computer science higher ed by 1, me, as well as the guilt of leaving behind the hundreds of students I had that depended on me so that they could one day get to the moment I myself was reaching, which was on May 9, 2013, the day that I started my first web dev industry job at the MBA. 5 years in the tech industry is a long time. I'm ready to retire. And it's a huge personal milestone for me to do anything for 5 years straight. So it's had me thinking this milestone a lot over the past couple of weeks about what brought me into this industry, what kept me here, and what needs to change for me to stay. So I'm gonna tell you something I've never really told anyone before. There's actually 2 precise reasons why I decided to leave academia for tech. The first one was a colleague, another professor, one day telling while we were arguing about something that I would never be a real web developer. And being a South Brooklyn girl, I'm internally fueled by rage. And so that got the process started. That was the first thing. And then the second was having a proposal for my first conference talk ever on April 4th of 2013. And that's what pushed me to be like, okay, I'm being recognized. I can do this. And that conference is jQuery Portland. So shout out to Rebecca Murphy, who emailed me asking me to propose that talk. That talk was called Learn Code, Make Art, using the right brain as a code education tool. And it was the debut of my platform as an artist, an educator, an engineer in the industry. And it was only 5 years ago, but for anyone to really embrace a woman who proudly identified as an artist and web developer, enough to like pay for my flight and hotel and give me a stage to talk on, was a pretty wild idea back then. And although quite like a really beautiful painting that like no one really recognizes until the artist is long dead, my talk was low attended and didn't really gain critical acclaim until other speakers were giving anecdotes about it. While earlier in the day, I had to like overhear people saying things like, let's get to the plugins talk. The art talk sounds dumb. By the end of the event, critics were raving about me with strong praise, like, is the talk going to be on video? I missed it. I remember sitting outside the convention center. I was handling both the post-talk adrenaline crash, if any of you have spoken will recognize and are probably feeling now, and also I was incredibly hungover, and I was sort of nursing the two by taking a shot of Tabasco, the hot legendary pepper sauce, realizing at that moment that, fuck, like, no matter what industry I'm in, I'm gonna be misunderstood wherever I go. But at least in web development, I will make more money and get free trips. Also notice here today that I am on stage talking about tech and art, and no one here is talking about jQuery plugins. So if you stepped into my office, I'm on Claire State. I did have my own office, there were no windows, but it was still mine. If you stepped in there 5 years ago and told me that in 2018, I'd be working at Fog Creek on a very cute and very powerful thing called Glitch that not only tolerates artists using code as a medium, but celebrates them actively building tools and fosters a community for them, I'd be like, nice. At that point, I was writing JavaScript on the server, so really like nothing surprised me at that point. And glitch.com is very nice. We call it the friendly community where you'll build the app of your dreams because we learned from the communities that we've grown up in, like Neopets and LiveJournal and GeoCities, that the tooling that you need to express yourself and make things with includes a great editor, that's our editor, but also the community that you become a part of along the way. So from the design and UX right down to the content we create on and about Glitch, we consistently express the importance of ethical technology because we know it's important for us and the industry as a whole. I mean, it's also important for society whose problems we're supposed to be solving using tech in the first place, right? I can spend 40 minutes just talking about Glitch and its features, like our super rad new Git visual interface we call Rewind, so you never have to waste a whole afternoon going back to a previous commit. We have no debugging in Chrome, embeds that even work in Medium posts. We've created starter apps that you can remix so you never have to roll your own OAuth again, and so on and so forth. But I think that you should just, this weekend or whatever day you want to code, I think you should take some time out later and check it out. Much like myself, it's very cute and powerful. And it's free. I'm pretty confident that you'll leave the site feeling very good. And if that's not the case, or if there are some features that you think that we should be building into it to make it a better experience for you and your team, we're accepting feedback right now, looking for what we're going to be bringing next to the product. So you can go to glitch.com for teams and figure that out. But what I am going to talk about today, April 27, 2018, is the intersection of art and code. But not about how I talked about it 5 years ago, my first conference talk, because in the 5 years since that talk, art and technology has come a really long way hand in hand. I see that with our community on Glitch. People are empowered to create art with code and vice versa. Like, it's here, it's ready. We see many more well-paying and interesting companies not caring about people's degrees being in creative areas, let alone companies not caring whether you have a degree or not in order to get into web development. It's great. And instead of being centralized to the Bay Area, we have a lot of really awesome tech companies here in New York City among really awesome art and technical institutions like NYU ITP's long-running program, and also the School for Poetic Computation that's a little bit newer. So we get to talk about and do so much around the intersection of art and code that like artists themselves roll their eyes and ironically use the phrase, the intersection of art and code. So it's a pretty amazing time, but also it's not. The one thing that concerns me now about the intersection of art and code is that we're not really hitting the good points of art, particularly when it comes to how it makes people, especially me, because it's all about me, feel. Because when I go into the Museum of Modern Art here in New York City, which I go to often, I typically leave feeling inspired or neutral. But when I spend a few minutes reading literally anywhere online, I typically log off feeling like trash. And this is a comparison that may require more nuance, but all in all, it seems to me like we should be creating technology that brings joy to people, or at the very least, not making them feel like trash. Actually, the very least should be that we not ruin lives, which is what technology is already doing today. And this isn't to say that art is perfect, far from it, but art has been around for a lot longer and has made the mistakes that we're making in technology now long before computers even existed. But in tech, we try to act like everything we're doing is actually innovative. And our mistakes aren't innovative. It's been made in art, and it's been installed a little bit in art, so we should be doing that. Now, I've been told that I'm not a real artist, and I've been told I'm not a real developer. And I think that instead of giving creative people shit based on some fake idea of real, we should be studying art and learning from, the art world's mistakes. And that's what my platform is now: artist, engineer, and educator who wants the tech industry to do better and be better, so I don't have to look for something else to do. I am a very busy woman. I don't have a weekend to lose sobbing in bed because I changed careers. Because right now, art and technology are great, but also bad. And so we're going to hear me talk about why. And this is the part where the camera zooms in and I wink at it. You can fix that in post. So one thing about both art and technology is sometimes that the content created in both worlds disappears without our permission. I call this non-consensual ephemerality, where everything dies, but should be on our own terms. My friend and fellow engineer and art enthusiast Jess Lord, who works at Splice here in New York, has seen every Vermeer in person, except one, the concert. In 1990, early 1990, it was one of the 13 works of art that included a bunch of Rembrandts also and other artists, was stolen from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. It was like a cinematic art heist, like security guards tied together. These works all together are valued at $500 million, and they're still missing. You can go to the Gardner Museum today. That's me posing there. It's kind of dark. But you can see the frames which held these paintings still hanging from the walls, which they were ripped off of like 28 years ago. And this is the museum's way of allowing people to experience the art, even though it has been taken away without anyone's consent. In the paper, The Afterlives of Network-Based Artworks, published last year in the Journal of the Institute of Conservation, art archivists discuss how we can do what the Gardner Museum did, but with digital art, which is keeping alive despite its absence. The paper's abstract raises the question: due to the obsolescence of software programs, hardware, and network infrastructures, many network-based artworks have disappeared. How can we give them an afterlife? So the authors used a software-based artwork by a French artist, Nicolas Frespech, called Les Secrets. That's the secrets in English. As an introductory example, they talked about how Les Secrets is a website that allowed users to share their secrets. It's just like a web form. The secrets are saved to a database. And because they were saved, the work was deemed immoral by a French conservative party that then had enough power to have the site shut down. This is around 2001. The hosting company shut it down and deleted all the data without creating a backup, ultimately turning the artwork into a web page with a message not found. The requested URL/secrets is not found on this server. Les Secrets is an example of non-consensual ephemerality and also my inability to use a French accent despite taking 5 years of French. And most importantly, I think, though, it's also proof that any web developer who has struggled with routing, you can now call yourself an artist. So congrats to all of us. As we build software to help people, artists or not, allow them to create content, we have to think about how can we keep this non-consensual ephemerality from occurring? And we can't always, so we have to think at the very least, how do we dull the impact that it has on our consumers? Are we proactively designing and building systems that guarantee that when those systems inevitably disappear, and we're all working on products and hope they last forever, we want to make sure that the soul of the content that our users are creating has a chance to live elsewhere, has an afterlife. But we're not doing a great job. So the shutdown of Vine was one of the biggest injuries to culture, digital culture, and my own ego in the past several years. It was a platform we were exposed to some of the, or at least I was exposed to some of the most diverse comedians in terms of like age, race, gender, and religion. And it was also a place for me to post my bullshit. Any sizable amount of what content is now on other platforms like include content from sites that have shut down. So you can find a lot of Vines on YouTube and Instagram. But for me, and everyone else that missed their weird arbitrary date where you can download your archive, our content now only lives on the Vine archive, which happens to be the buggiest infinite scroll interface in my entire life. It took me like 20 minutes to scroll down to try to get this Vine. My CEO's like, use one where the thumbtacks come out of your mouth. There's like 20 of those. Which one, Anil? But I can do a whole other talk on infinite scrolling. When we build software, especially around a community, we owe them the due diligence of preparing for our software's inevitable obsolescence. We should not be locking our users and their content into our platform, either through the inability to export their information or data, or by adding proprietary protocols or special languages to get things going. And users, even those who don't know how to code, are becoming more savvy about platform lock-in as they encounter more frequent shutdowns like Vine. Because these are apps that they've come to love over the past couple of years, and then they disappear. They haven't really had an idea of how inevitable obsolescence is in tech until recent time. And so I feel like as software designers and developers, we have to adapt to that growing lack of trust that people have in us when we invite them into our platforms and communities, which takes a little bit of getting rid of ego, but if I can do that, so can all of you. A thing that I really love about Glitch, and this is like non-negotiable with like all of us on the team, is that there is no lock-in or special protocols that keep people on the platform without their consent. We allow all of your apps on Glitch to be exported to GitHub, or you can download a zip file of all your files, because not everyone uses GitHub. In order to run an app on Glitch, it just looks at your package.json file. There's no special scripts, it just looks at NPM scripts. So if you export the app and you put it on any node server or static site server, it runs. So there's like absolutely no lock-in to Glitch. We sort of count on the fact that Glitch is a really great community and a great tool, so you might want to keep it there. But if you don't, have a good rest of your journey. The community site glitch.com is itself a Glitch app, and we recently open sourced it to community contribution. So you can scroll down to the bottom of glitch.com and click view source, and you can view the full stack source of our app and contribute to it. And I hope Glitch lasts forever. I really like this job. And I really love the product. And I don't love a lot of things. And I'm confident that it will last forever, but I'm even more confident that if we get to the moment where we have to flip that on switch to off, we would have put, at that point, a lot of thought and care into what would have gone into the community before and after doing so. And I know this can be done because MapZen, which is an open source mapping platform that provided services in the form of API requests, did just this. Earlier this year, they shut down, but provided a schedule for what services would stop and when. They provided alternatives to use. And because they open sourced their core products, former employees and other people were able to take them and create alternatives, like NextZen as an example. Open source, which used to be seen as like low quality and untrustworthy by consumers, that perception is shifting because of graceful shutdowns like this, and also consumers understanding that software is a lot more obsolescent than they had considered them to be. Now imagine if Vermeer's The Concert was found in another museum or person's home, and that was where it would remain without consequence, which sounds like bananas unfair, because surely it would be returned to the Garden Museum, the people who stole the paintings would be arrested. There have been a lot of systems and laws in place to prove ownership, certify art is real, and hold people accountable for theft. Just in general, you shouldn't steal shit. But ownership is not nearly as fair outside of the fine art market. There are museums around the world, like the British Museum, filled with artifacts of its brutal colonial history. These are items stolen from cultures some of our ancestors have actively tried to eliminate in our expansion. And through years of warranted anger and debate and a lot of hard work, a lot of these museums institutions have been slowly returning those items to the rightful people. Because it turns out that tangible ancient items are somewhat easier to do that with than digital artifacts. Our laws have a hard enough time keeping up with technologies of centuries ago, like guns. So it's not surprising that it's incredibly hard to protect the ownership of our art on the web. And a lot of the advocacy for independent digital artists come from themselves, but they're up against huge corporations with infinitely more money and lawyers. Take, for example, this shirt by one of my favorite lifestyle brands, Stay Home Club. And this is a shirt from the major retailer Reserved. I've been watching a lot of Forensic Files lately, so I'm basically an actual detective. So I know that if I just move them closer, enhance, and draw some arrows on it, yes, this is a ripoff of an independent artist by a major retailer. You can find this and many other examples on Shop Art Theft. This is an initiative started by an independent artist, Adam J.K., from here in New York, that allows he and other artists, and basically anybody, to gather evidence of corporate ripoffs like these. A lot of times when they're called out, they'll take the stuff down from their store page, but there's really no recourse after that. And this happens literally all the time, online and in some of your favorite stores and brands, like Gucci, Urban Outfitters, Zara. So software developers, we're also consumers. We're not just creating. And as consumers in general, we owe it to artists to be more educated and research art originality. The technology exists. You can reverse image search anything. And much like you wouldn't blindly purchase a Vermeer without verifying its authenticity, we should not be just using artwork in our products or just in our own consumer life without knowing where it came from and without confirming that proper compensation had occurred. And again, it's a lot easier to do that than it was a long time ago. Now, if this isn't enough for you to care about this because it's the right thing to do, let's put all the ego back on and only care about ourselves and consider the fact that those of us who write code or make designs can and do have the same thing happen to us often. At a former job, I once had my work put on hold because patent trolls were trying to sue us over something that was an HTML standard. And because it was HTML standard, the case didn't really go anywhere. But that was also mostly because we had lots of money and lawyers to deal with it. If you happen to work at a small consulting company, patent troll case could mean financial ruin and shutdown of your company. And I don't have any solutions to that. It's just a thing that happens. Who here has been following the high drama and entertainment of the Oracle v. Google case? It's been going on for 8 years now. Imagine a federal judge having to write code as part of a court order. Who here has been following Waymo v. Uber? That has not been going on for 8 years. Well, I think many of us knew that Uber was bad, and what Henri had said about maybe Uber using that new API to double charges and stuff, yeah, I totally expect Uber to do that. But did we really think that they were pay a dude to stuff a hard drive in a shirt and leave bad? Companies are banking on us and our justice system not knowing how technology works or fits into the law. And shout out to my pal Sarah at The Verge, who's been tirelessly following all of these cases and absolute ridiculousness. You really should read back on this stuff. It's really wild what these companies are trying to get past us and our very old justice system. And it's easy because a lot of us don't understand our rights or how far we can be held accountable for the code that we write. Our only recourse is to hope that no one steals our work or sues us wrongfully in order to take advantage of our behind-the-times justice system. Also, like, developers are sort of ignorant of how much they can be held accountable for code. I don't have a slide for it, but like, look up the guy from Volkswagen who was arrested for writing code that was bad. We can't really pass the buck off to our managers all the time. But for those of us making tools, we should be, instead of making it easier to steal content, we should be making it easy to share and to express ownership. And understanding and using software licenses in our work is an important and somewhat, it's not easy, but it's a more accessible thing to get into than how do I fight a corporation that stole my design. Last year, we added a feature to Glitch that made the process for choosing and adding a license to your open source apps a lot faster. Not having that feature made developers nervous because there's so much mystery to begin with about software ownership. Having our tools help us navigate that is extremely effective. We all need to do a better job at making ownership, lock-in, and the related characteristics of our products transparent and part of our features. Ownership ties in quite nicely with appropriation. The Take Guide to Modern Art terms defines appropriation as the taking over into a work of art of a real object or even an existing work of art. And this definition of appropriation in art world is an argument many people, white people, use when we wrongfully appropriate cultures, which are not real objects or an existing work of art, but more the identity, stories, and connections of a person and their communities and past. The art world has a very long history of white people taking the stories of marginalized and using it as their own for their art, or otherwise fame and fortune, which brings me this story. In 1955, a 21-year-old white woman named Carolyn Bryant lied and said that Emmett Till, a 14-year-old black boy, was making advances towards her at a local shop. He was brutally lynched by a group of white men who were acquitted and were, thanks to double jeopardy, allowed to publicly admit, yes, we did commit the crime, bragging about it even. Till's mother held an open casket funeral to expose the product of such hate and injustice, and he posthumously became an icon of the civil rights movement. Now, 62 years later, at the Whitney Museum here in New York, and coming off of years of critique over the lack of representation of artists of color in the museum. In their biennial last year, 2017, they showed a painting portraying Till's open casket. It's called Open Casket. The painting was by Dana Schutz, who is a white woman, and it caused a lot of anger from the black community and led to a powerful protest by this artist, Parker Bright. The back of his shirt says Black Death Spectacle, and he stood right directly in front of it. The reason why I bring this story up is because I think about it all the time. Like Dana Schutz, I'm a white woman. I sometimes brush my hair. And I'm also an artist and a storyteller. I have a lot of room to overstep boundaries with little consequences, if any. And in doing so, I can and probably sometimes have stifled or misinterpreted the voice of others, especially in my work of portraiture, or more relevant to this moment, my work of spoken word on stage. In response to the protests, Schutz said art can be a space for empathy, which is a tale as old as time of doubling down and refusing to recognize that we are overstepping our boundaries, and that can and usually will hurt people. And we have to own up to that. We have to apologize and take the painting down instead of spinning it into a tale of our own empathy and attempts at empathy. Because empathy is exactly what Mark Zuckerberg said was a powerful feature of virtual reality when he created this, what is probably most comically, most tone-deaf augmented reality experience. This is a cartoon version of him interviewing a woman in front of, I think another Facebook employee, in front of the post-hurricane devastation of Puerto Rico. And they're about to give each other a high five. If you absolutely need to use someone else's personal story and tragedy to show off your technology, and you probably don't, let them write and tell that narrative. give them the platform, or at the very least, like, give them a chance to tell you that you're totally fucking blowing it. Many of you have probably heard of the Startup Bodega. They were started by two former Googlers who, before really being known, let the press write their narrative, which is never a great idea, and it was written in a light that made them look like they were trying to replace actual bodegas, which are very beloved, especially here in New York City. And even if that was not their intent, their appropriation of a Hispanic name and a concept meant to disrupt the culture of a community-tied business run primarily by people of color just wasn't a good look. In response to the protests online, the co-founder, Paul McDonald, said, we did some homework, speaking to New Yorkers, branding people, and even running some survey work, asking about the name and any potential offense it might cause. But it's clear that we may not have been asking the right questions of the right people. No shit. That lack of oversight, or I think in that case, the active ignorance of it, to find the right people is another thing that people of privilege consistently do and get away with. And it's why we continue to have a growing representation problem, which is a lot more dire than you may actually think than just having a diverse group of people sitting inside the room together. In John Berger's book, The Ways of Seeing, he says, you painted a naked woman because you enjoyed looking at her, put a mirror in her hand, and you called the painting vanity, thus morally condemning the woman whose nakedness you had depicted for your own pleasure. For those of you who don't know, I am an erotic pixel artist, so this quote is very near and dear to me. That lack of accountability for all these issues in the art and tech worlds comes down to a lack of representation. A problem that art and tech both have is deep-rooted misogyny. This is the misogyny that leads to most of the female representation in museums being the nude women on the walls and not the artists whose work is actually being shown. Kind of reminds you of tech, right? And many of us in this room know very well that there's a lack of representation of genders in this industry, one which used to be mostly women. And this leads to huge oversights, like Apple releasing its health app without any reproductive or menstrual health trackers in it, which they'd since fixed after people were like, hey, women use this, women and men who have their periods use this, why isn't it here? You know, we say that we're solving societal problems and changing the world, but we're leaving out the majority of the population and only solving problems of the cisgender white male when we all should have a shot at solutions, including cisgender white men. But when those of us who want equality for everyone protest the obvious harassment or lack of representation in the workplace and at tech events, we're called social justice warriors and are accused of being the ones who are sexist. And we can't just pretend this is a gender problem or that social justice has to be a synchronous right of protests or solutions. Artist Hannah Black said, among many other powerful words in the protests of Dana Schutz's painting, that contemporary art is a fundamentally white supremacist institution despite all our nice friends, which can be said about tech. We white people created systems through the slave trade that kept black people from contributing to art history. When you were a slave, you were not making oil paintings of that time. And we've kept those systems, which leads to black artists today still being marginalized in the art world. And we've done it to Asian people, we've done it to Hispanic people, we all know we've done it to Native American people. I have some hope that the intersection of art and code can help tear down these systems instead of strengthening them. And I really want to get excited when big companies do it, but we already saw from Amelie's talk what happened when Google tried to tag photographs of black people. What does it look like when Google tries the intersection of art and code? It's not great. Google's art and culture app let users in the United States submit a selfie in exchange for being programmatically matched with a somewhat similar face from a historical artwork, and because the data comes from the very white, Eurocentric history of art, it's really only an enjoyable experience if you are a white person. So here we have an app that was meant to create joy and take our data, but it left many users being reminded that not only in the past were they not welcome, but thanks to us using white supremacist data today, they remain unwelcome. And even more appalling is the fact that we're already sentencing people and deciding on parole options based on these proprietary, unchecked algorithms. And so the same systems that we white people have created is now making tech a fundamentally white supremacist institution. And it's not just the number of people of color we allow to have well-paying developer jobs. It affects our consumers. And computers can only be smart and unbiased as we let them be, which isn't much. So in October of last year, Lamont McIntyre was freed from prison after 23 years, which was the majority of his life at that point. And he was locked up for a murder he didn't commit and from which there was no physical evidence. They probably won't have an episode of Forensic Files about it. There just wasn't anything there. And humans made that mistake, not computers. So consider that our biases like that are being built into machine learning technology and being used to disproportionately affect people of color. We are living in a white supremacist society, so our data is therefore white supremacist. And so our AI fed that data is therefore white supremacist, full stop. Another thing people forget is that computers are not smarter than humans, they are faster. So we should be building technology to solve problems that require solutions that are more efficient than human solutions. And sentencing people to prison isn't a speed problem, it's an empathy problem. And so for us to pass that responsibility off to a machine is lazy, unethical, immoral, and it should be criminal. But at this point, we really care more about paintings on the wall than we do about the people around us using our technology. If I walk into an art gallery and I start painting over paintings or tearing them down, I would be arrested if caught. Not rewarded with a multi-million-dollar government contract. So here we are, stuck in a vicious cycle of gatekeeping, where we keep the underrepresented, and then continue creating bad technology. Because we have to admit, a lot of software we're using sucks. And it's worse off for society as a whole, especially the underrepresented. And while we're busy appropriating cultures and solving problems that don't, in the grander scheme of things, exist, we claim that actual, real problems are too hard to solve, like tagging Black people in a photo not as gorillas, or accessibility, our industry's favorite afterthought. And in the art world, it's hard to get your work to show in a gallery. You do have to deal with critics who are deciding what art is. But ultimately, the tools for expressing yourself are quite available and accessible. They're cheap tools. You can buy art supplies in the grocery store. You can get things from nature and create art from that. Tools are made in different ways to help people who have different abilities to use them, and there are different movements and types of media to choose from, and room for more to be discovered. And I wonder, will technology ever get to that point? And we're actively trying to do that with Glitch through our platform. It's challenging, building a friendly community where you can build the app of your dreams, especially when there's so much commentary online about why not everyone should code, false assumptions on why or if diversity exists, or even just the active ignorance of our inclusivity problems. It feels like an uphill battle all the time, and I'm quite often tired when I talk about this stuff. But I've discovered that over the past 5 years since joining the industry, that an impactful way to combat those haters is to create my own content and facilitate others in the creation of their own, and spread the word that not everyone should have to code, but if they want to, they should have the access to learning to code. Unless that tool is blood parabiosis, no one needs that. So sometimes after I give these sort of talks, people are like, well, if tech is so bad, then why should we make it more accessible? Shouldn't people who are good go do something else? And yeah, I talk a lot about the issues of tech, but the fact of the matter is, compared to academia, it's a field that I can solve societal problems and be paid well for it. And that's incredibly empowering and challenging and fun. And much of the work is flexible with regards to location. And also, if you really like working with different kinds of subjects all the time, it's very interdisciplinary. And if you go on Glitch, you'll find all sorts of apps about different things, and it shows that code really is just a medium that can be used to create whatever you desire, whether it's art or a dev tool or a consumer product. And you might think that like ethical tech is somewhat irrelevant a topic to the creation of a collaborative in-browser editor. But what sets code tooling apart, especially these days, is community and word clouds, but more importantly, community. And I think that ours totally rules. We have artists, teachers, hardcore engineers, like you name it. Companies like Slack use us to teach developers how to build Slack integrations. Chrome DevTools engineers are using Glitch to reproduce, share bug reproductions. Open source projects like Prosmere are embedding Glitch in their docs so that you have a working example to get going with it within seconds. And a lot of people are using it to enhance their docs and just create cool things that other people can build off of. I want to show you one of my favorite Glitch moments. Over the summer, my friend Dan made Facemoji. This is related to some of the stuff Wes was talking about with face recognition and get user media. He made a Glitch app that added emoji pieces to your face, detecting your eyes. It brought me great joy, as tech should. And because I love to make things about me, though, I decided to remix it, because you can remix apps on Glitch, and replace the emoji face pieces with my own, which brought Dan great joy. Then my pal Ben remixed it to make it even weirder. But like, it doesn't always have to be weird. This company, Lorem from New York City, just launched this week. They built their MVP on Glitch and raised $1 million. It's a weird world. And back in 2003, I felt like I was cheating by changing jobs from a state university to a world-famous sports league. I was constantly like, what did I do to deserve this? My peers were asking the same question, because they're jerks. I want to tell you, like, that feeling has like not changed at all, even 5 years later. Working on Glitch totally feels like I'm cheating. I get to be involved with the friendliest community of coders. I get to go and talk to the friendliest community of people that I hope become part of that community. I get to say community a lot. It's a big word. I get to code basically anything I want because our product is a code editor. That is kind of cheating. But what I want to see in this industry is people not feeling like they're cheating by being here using our products. There's a lot of barriers and constraints that's the reason why a lot of us who do get through and become successful feel like even 5 years later that we don't deserve to be here, that we're cheating. But we all deserve to be here. I think it's important to remember that despite all the barriers and constraints, we all as individuals matter, our ideas matter, and we should have access to the tools and media we need to express ourselves, whether it's pen or paper or code and editor, but we need to make sure we pay that access forward once we have it. We should be in a space where we feel welcome, both in our work and play, but we need to make sure we don't pull the ladder up behind us when we get there. We should be allowed to own our expression, but we have to own up when we harm other people's ability to express themselves. And this especially applies to how others are affected by the tech that we build. I've been thinking also a lot about how interesting it is that it took so long for diversity and inclusivity to become topics at a tech conference. It's fantastic, but also I'm like, what took so fucking long? Again, in tech, we think that the problems that we have are like new and these are new concepts, and there are people who think diversity and inclusivity is just like a new thing that we've discovered, but I grew up watching so much Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, I was convinced he was my father. And diversity and inclusivity were concepts he exposed to me long before I even knew what a computer was. And I think that finally we're starting to tie them together and other social policies to work. And I hope that that speeds up the process to making tech diverse and inclusive. Because what Mr. Rogers is saying here about drawing with crayons applies to code. It feels good to have made something. The best thing is that each person's would be different. My dad also said when he was inducted into the TV Hall of Fame, fame is a four-letter word. And like tape or Zoom or face or pain or life or love, what ultimately matters is what we do with it. And as you leave this conference, I want you to remember that tech is also a four-letter word. Thank you very much.